Hello, and welcome to the Flicks Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today, we've got Netflix's 108th film. It's the 2018 Israeli-American spy thriller, The Angel, directed by Ariel Vromen, and it stars Marwan, Kenzari, and Toby Kebbell. I'm Jesse, and here, as usual, with MJ. How you doing?
I'm very well, Jesse. How are you?
Oh, yes, yes, we've had some warmer weather, which has been nice. We've had some rain. We've had a bit of everything at the moment. Wind, so it's got me in the mood to talk.
We are still probably the most locked down city in the world at the moment. So getting to talk about movies might be our shining light of our week, to be honest.
Yeah, it might be the only positive thing at the moment because it looks like we might be in this for a little bit of a longer time than hoping. But we'll stick it out and we can still chat, obviously over video call, which is a nice thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, we start off our show with our fast flicks where we do our own little summary of the film. So, MJ, what's your fast flicks for The Angel?
All right. So I see it as a political behind the scenes look at one man's impact on the war between Egypt or the Arab United Nations and Israel.
Yeah, exactly the gist of the story. It's obviously based on a true story. High-ranking Egyptian official who provided information to the Israelis on attacks during the 1970s. So it's a nice little retelling of a historical event that 50 years ago or so. So I guess it's sort of past. It's a fair way in that past now that it's probably not close enough for us to sort of be like, well, obviously neither of us are old enough to remember it, but it's
No, obviously.
it's one of those historical events. It's not like a World War II, but it's still sort of that nice little historical thing that's like, oh, here's a story maybe I didn't know, which is cool.
That's well put. It certainly is that for me.
Probably took me a while to get where I was trying to say, but that's I think we got one. Good. So we kick off, or we lead into what we may have found out about the making of it. So what could you work out about how this was put together?
So look, as you said, it's based on a true story of Ashraf Marwan, who played a pretty big role, from what I can gather, to help politically shape the Middle East back in the 20th century. So the film itself was based then on a New York Times best-selling book, which was called The Angel, the Egyptian Spy Who Saved Israel, which was based on that true story. So it was the 5th of May 2017 when they announced Marwan Kenzari was set to star in The Angel, and that's the first we really heard of it. Ariel Vromen was on from the director, and the screenplay was written by David Arata, who had written Children of Men. So it was produced by Simon Istalainen and Antoine Stewie. So they'd been working on the project for quite a long time before it got anywhere near production. And Netflix basically came on board as the global distributor in around June, July 2017, from what I can gather. And this was just prior to them starting production of the film. So Netflix obviously was very popular in that sense, where they let the filmmakers maintain as much of the flavor and authenticity on the project so they could continue to be as ambitious as they wanted with it, which is a very familiar trait we see for Netflix films across this podcast. So it was July 2017 when they began filming production. So that was in London, but it was also shot in other parts of the UK, Bulgaria, and Morocco. And then the film obviously came out just over a year later in September, although it was originally scheduled for a June release that same year. So that is kind of the story of how it got onto our Netflix screens.
Very nice. This one had a budget as well.
It did, yes.
Did 12, was it 12 million? From, I think, was it
$12 million is what I've got, yeah. So I did have a little bit of a look through the archive.
Yeah, good. This is my favorite.
I did want to call out Jaws and The Exorcist were both made by $12 million. We're talking about a completely different era, but I did want to call that out, that for $12 million you could have made Jaws. But also similar films, just to get a flavor of what you can do with $12 million. American Pie was $12 million. Fault in Our Stars, Project X, Three Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, Lion from a couple of years ago, from what I can gather, though, $12 million, very common budget. There's tons and tons of films that are made for $12 million, but that's the kind of stuff you're looking at. So you look at things like Three Billboards and Lion, you can obviously make an Oscar-nominated movie with $12 million if you want.
Good, yeah. I guess I'll probably put this out there now that a couple of the things that I've found out about the film might head into spoiler territory. So
good call.
If you did want to watch this one, give us a pause because I'm going to give away a couple of little key things about this one. But I guess the part that I like to look up now are the title in different languages now. And while a lot of countries played some sort of little alternate sort of version on the word spy or code name, like the code name The Angel, the German title was the title of the book it was based on, so the Egyptian spy who saved Israel. The Japanese title is the only one that sort of stood out for me, and it was translated into Forever Mine, which, like, I couldn't draw any connection as to what that translation meant, but I thought that was quite funny. Forever Mine. So yeah, that was a good one.
That one got lost in translation, I think.
Massively. I like the tagline for this one, which was in the shadow of war, one man fought for peace. And I just thought that tagline went really well with the poster that you may see online or on Netflix, where you've got his face, the main character, what's his name, Ashraf. You've got his face and just the shadows in between his face. I just thought that was a really cool tagline for some of the promotional material that I did see. Now this is leading into a little bit of spoiler territory, but just some differences between real life and I guess this take on, I mean, obviously there's going to be some things you change for narrative purposes, but with this one, for example, the character in the film, we see Diana. Now, in real life, he never had this affair with a lady called Diana. He didn't really have an affair with her in the film anyway, but they sort of made it out that his wife left him because of her thoughts of him being with her.
Jealousy.
But in real life, him and his wife stayed together right up to his death. So I just thought that was so I thought that was a big sort of difference in the way that they.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, so they stayed together until his death. And I think in the credits at the end, this is obviously another spoiler. They explain that he died under sort of mysterious circumstances in 2007. They didn't really mention in the credits, though, that this was only 3 weeks after an Israeli court actually named him as an agent who gave Israel information. So, so his cover was pretty much blown. So 3 weeks after his name's put out there for people to see, this is when he disappears under mysterious circumstances. So I thought that gave a little bit more context in real life as to what had happened with him, which I thought was interesting. Like, it's always nice to see something where you go and look a bit more into detail into it to try and work out some more information, because you want to know more.
Yeah, absolutely. I find those last 2 points that you made interesting. That firstly, him not actually breaking up with his wife makes me think that they really wanted to show the toll that this took on him from a cinematic perspective by saying, look, this guy basically sacrificed everything to get what he got in the end. But then the thing with his death, I mean, I must admit, I did read that as being insanely suspicious that someone had obviously come in and taken him out. But that context makes it even stronger, and to be honest, even a lot more sadder as well.
Completely agree. It won one award. It was the jury prize winner for Best Feature Film at the Life Art Festival in 2019. Had a look at the other films it was up against and couldn't name any of them. So I'm not too sure it's a massive win. I had a percentage match for this one too on Netflix, which I haven't had in quite a while. No, it had me down for 83%. So on the high end, which
definitely, your ones do go a bit lower.
Yeah, I was just happy to have one because it seems like forever since I've had one. But yeah, I guess this is where we sort of lead into the part where we talk a little bit about the consensus. So what consensus critics and audience have you got for this one?
Yeah, from what I found, it was really popular, to be honest. It's sitting at a 6.6 out of 10 on IMDb, just over 11,000 ratings, which is quite a bit. And then it's a flat 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Weirdly, only just over 1,000 ratings. So a huge discrepancy between the amount of people that have rated this on Letterboxd compared to IMDb. Now, we know IMDb generally is higher, but This is significantly higher, but still 3 out of 5 over 1,000 people. Generally popular. Isn't that your wife's thing? If it's not got a 3 on Letterboxd, she ain't watching it.
Correct. Yeah, I could have got her to watch this one with me. The Google users like this. They had this at 82%, so on the highish end. Rotten Tomatoes, there was no consensus from the critics. 75% on 12 reviews, so heading on that fresh side. And the audience had it at 61%, so still also on that fresh side, but only on 240 ratings, which is again very, very low. But good little overall picture there. So that it leads us into our early thoughts on this. Fill us in.
Yeah, look, obviously, I think I told you, I didn't know anything about this story. I was even confused, not confused, it's the wrong word. I'm glad this movie wasn't called, what was the Egyptian spy who saved Israel, because I was, obviously on the fence as to whether he was a good guy or not for most of this film. But the story was really dry in detail, I found, but there was a lot of interesting points within it. So it just took a long time for me to be interested in that side of it. So I suppose a 2-hour film about a lead up to war can be a slog at times. It's obviously got a lot of detail, a lot of politics to it. So I like how it ended up. It definitely caught me off guard how well things tied in together and actually became of interest to me, because I was struggling with it. It was very slow, and I certainly got bored throughout, but it did cinematically. It actually really kind of worked eventually.
Yeah, good. That's a good little observation way of putting it, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, I think for me this one, like I didn't know the story, so it was nice for me to sit back and just learn something new about a different character in this type of time in the world that I know a little bit about. And I thought the tension build throughout was pretty good. There were lots of scenes where I was on edge, going, "Oh no, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?" And that, like, I was intrigued to see what was happening. And this is the sort of film that I reckon back when I was studying international relations, I would have thought this was like the bee's knees, like when Argo came out and those types of films. I was like, this is amazing. Yeah. Like this is the sort of film that I've just been drooling over and going, I can relate what I'm studying to in a film. Like, it's awesome. So, yeah,
Sure.
I enjoyed it at various stages throughout, and yeah, enjoyed the story.
Yeah, I think we're probably on a similar page with this.
Yeah, good. All right, so let's jump into the characters. This one had a multitude of various people playing different parts and different players in this, obviously based on a true life story. So they wanted to try and show as many of these people that the characters met up with and what sort of role they played in the situation and the actual event. But from, I guess, the film side of things, who would you like to start with, MJ?
Oh, look, it's obvious, right? Let's start with the angel himself, Ashraf Marwan. Did you notice Ashraf Marwan, an actor's name, his first name was Marwan, spelled exactly the same? Just thought that was curious. But again, culturally, it's probably something that is quite common that I shouldn't have even brought up. Anyway.
He's actually Dutch. Did you say that?
Yeah, I did see that, actually. Yeah,
I thought that was... Yeah, anyway, sorry, keep going.
Look, I think Ashraf was, despite the fact that he is based on a real person, I thought he was a pretty complicated character. I think they really set him up as either someone who was doing the wrong thing or was just way over his head. And I thought of him as this real slime ball at times, despite all the clues that were there suggesting that he wasn't. I spent a lot of this movie more or less disliking him, but giving him the benefit of the doubt because he was the film's protagonist. So I'm like, okay, we're on board with this guy. I'm jumping in the driver's seat with him. I'm happy. I want him to succeed, but I kind of don't like him. But then by the end of it, it's not the case. Everything he's doing with great intentions, doing for the right reasons. And I just think that watching this film and seeing him as a hero would really help the way that I think you view the film in general. And that's kind of how I felt about it, because he was a playmaker through all of this. And they kind of reveal that really late.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point, because the setup of him being this Egyptian national person who's his father-in-law is the president, yeah, and they set him up early on that even when Nasser dies, that he still works for the new president as well, and So they make this motive almost for him for when he does start leaking this information, because of this relationship with his father-in-law, the president, that didn't like him. So the first thing that you think
Mm.
about him is and I still don't know whether I believe that motivation as the true motivation as to why you do something like this, just that your father-in-law doesn't like you. I think that's a pretty extreme thing to do, but they make it out that like this is one of the reasons. But then as the film goes on, like just in the back of my mind, I'm continually thinking, is this still the reason, or is the reason more greed? Like, is he more motivated by the cash rewards that he's receiving? And that's where I got to the end, and I still found him really complicated, because I still don't
Right.
know if I can think of him as, I still don't know what his motivations were. Was it because he loved his wife and he wanted to do right for her by building up this cash reserve that they could live a good life, or was he doing it just out of pure hatred of his father-in-law? Like, these are two really complicated sort of things that I don't think is properly answered, which I don't mind.
Yeah, let's just break this down so I'm clear on everything. So he initially makes that phone call because he wanted to get back at his father-in-law, right? That was a spiteful thing for him to do, to say, "Hey, I've got some secrets I can leak to you." That's how I read it. Even he might have had good intentions of how it all ended up. I got
Mm.
the feeling that it was just like, "Nah, screw this bastard. I'm gonna blackmail him or double cross him."
Mm.
That's how you read it.
Yeah, that was well. That's how I think the filmmakers wanted you to see it to start off with, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you read the book, you'd get a completely different version of it. But I think that probably helped with. And I don't want to lead into Mona, his wife, just yet, but I really the way that they showed her character really annoyed me, because the only times we really got to see her was when she was cracking at Ashraf for being unfaithful when he wasn't unfaithful. And, they showed her as this sponge and it's this complicated relationship with the father, who was obviously funding his education and his gambling issue as well, which, that's a big sort of thing, this negative sort of connotation that you've got with Ashraf,
Mm,
that the president doesn't like him. The wife's concerned about the gambling, but yeah, the, the context of her relationship with him, which is something that you want to root for him, because you can see that she means a lot
yeah.
to him, because he doesn't want to be with this Diana chick. He wants he goes to Gaddafi's palace, and Gaddafi's offering him all
Yeah.
these girls. Like, no, I'm married. So you could see deep down that he cared about his wife, but at the same time, it was like I couldn't see why he cared so much about her.
Yeah, I get it. It's really complicated because I feel like he got himself into this position for the wrong reasons, and then he basically got blackmailed into giving them more information. And then it seems like he hatched up this whole plan, knowing that he could pull strings on both sides. And basically, his plan was to have this war because they could realize how detrimental it was going to be, and then sign a peace treaty. And he kept Israel in the loop to give them the heads up, so there wouldn't be as many casualties, I guess. And all of a sudden, it worked out. The peace that he wanted in the first place kind of
Mm.
worked out. But he sounds like a mastermind, but I think he basically scrambled his way through this whole thing because of mistakes he might have made in the first place.
Yeah, good point.
So yeah, you're right about it being so complicated, because you'd love to think that, oh, here's this guy with this single vision that he just wanted things to be peaceful, and he could foresee what was going to happen, and he did what he could to fix it. But yeah, it wasn't as clear as that, which is great. It humanizes him, right?
Mm. Well, who else would you like to talk about?
Well, the other main one for me is Danny, or Alex. Let's call him Danny. To me, he felt relatable, as relatable as someone who works in private intelligence can actually be. But the fact that he just basically trusted his gut, he didn't necessarily work by the book, and he put his family first. He certainly wasn't perfect at this job that normally I wouldn't even bother trying to figure out because it's just way beyond me. I think it was important to have someone that the audience could cling on to, even if it was just a little bit. In a sense, it made him out to be a bit of this buddy pairing with Ashraf, because so many other characters in this film went completely over my head, because there were so many of them and they had such small roles that probably seemed important that I just almost stopped caring who was on what side and who wanted what to happen, because it was just the nitty gritty got me confused. So, despite the fact that Danny wasn't an overly interesting character, I think I found him someone that I could grab onto, because there wasn't many others that I could.
Yeah, I agree. I think the relatability for him a little bit leads into the fact that you still saw the consequences, or the ramifications of him trusting Ashraf with like the people in charge of him as well. And you sort of felt that danger for him when, you think he's doing the right thing by trusting him, but you can see that if things do go wrong, he's going to be in just as much strife as well. And I guess that sort of makes it more like the more accountability, which makes you feel more in danger for him as a character as well a little bit. I think that everything you said about him was spot on, because it was just even like the way they introduced him in that bathroom scene where you've got the text on the screen and the way he just walks and the camera follows him throughout into the meeting with Ashraf. I thought he was a cool character, and surrounded by a lot of people that were doing the wrong thing most of the time, I guess.
Yeah, true.
I just want, like Diana, I've mentioned her a couple of times already. I just really, especially after the fact, when that's like she didn't really exist there was never a situation where he used a woman like that. It just makes me think, like, why did we need her? Like, she's constantly throwing herself on him. Like that was a little bit gross.
This is the exact same question I had, and I'm staggered that she wasn't this real big player in real life, because the only reason that I understood why she was in this film was because she must have been in real life and they didn't quite know how to do it, because the relationship with Diana was super weird, because they made it out like they were long lost friends, but they never really established how or why they became friends. They just bumped into each other at a bar one night, spoke for about 4 seconds, and then all of a sudden he was asking favors from her all the time. Like it didn't fit at all. It was bizarre.
And even her introduction, like what's the first thing? She's like, "Oh, you want to come back to my house and watch people have sex?" Pretty much. It was a weird character. Yeah, I'm glad you thought the same thing. I thought the last one I've got that I wanted to bring up was the Sami character, Sami Sharaf. I just thought, so he was the right hand man to Nasser when he was president, and then he was trying to do anything he could possibly do to discredit Ashraf, to support his boss and prove that the man that his daughter's with is the wrong sort of person. And I thought that it was cool to see Ashraf be able to turn that table on him and end up leaking some information that got him locked up. And I just liked this constant check-in with him in prison, having these people tail Ashraf to sort of check in with the story. It was nice to see from a different point of view rather than this linear sort of story of exactly what was happening. It sort of kept you thinking about what was going on. So I just I thought that was a nice little character to have in there as well.
That's fair. I think that probably the one thing that didn't work for me with that was he felt so powerless where he was, despite the fact they were getting him followed. They kept going back to this guy who's in prison, and I just kind of think, well, hang on, what's he actually going to be able to do in all this? But it's a good point. It certainly made it a little bit more interesting from a storytelling perspective.
Good. All right. Any other characters that you wanted to talk about?
No, there were too many small ones that I just didn't want to bother with, to be honest. It just hurt my head too much trying to figure everything else out that was going on politically.
Fair enough. All right. The director, interesting little bit of a career.
Absolutely. So this is his 5th feature. He did Criminal back in 2015, which I didn't know was him. Obviously, that's Kevin Costner, Gary Oldman, Tommy Lee Jones, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot. I don't think the film probably didn't do as well as they would have hoped, but it was a pretty cool project. And he also did The Iceman with Michael Shannon, Winona Ryder, Chris Evans, Ray Liotta, James Franco, which again is based on a true story, and you can kind of see the comparisons with how he made this film and how he made that film. But yeah, as you said, like he's definitely carving out a nice little career.
Yeah, everything you said I had, so thank you. What about some scenes that worked for you?
Yeah, so look, as I sort of said, there was a lot of things that I found a little bit slow and draggy, but I think the first scene that really got me interested was when he got pulled out of class and he was told that the president was dead. It broke away from the monotony that was really creeping into that film, and I think you're supposed to assume that it's going to have to do with the phone call that he made. That's why he's getting pulled out of class. It's going to get interesting. When they said the president was dead, I was like, oh, wow, okay, that's going to change things completely. So very important scene because it just got things on track for me, which was really struggling at the time. So, and then apart from that, like the next thing I really liked was the reveal of the opening scene that we see turning out to be a double cross with the guns that he delivers not firing, because I think you get a little bit annoyed that you're like, oh, well, hang on, we know that he's going to change sides here, or we know that he's going to deliver these guns. And when that didn't work, I was like, oh, well, you got me. Well done. It wasn't like you were just saying, we're going to tell you the story leading up to this point, and now you know, and now we're all up to date. It was like, no, we've got a few tricks up our sleeves from a storytelling perspective, and I like that. And then I just really love the reveal about the whole thing being Ashraf's plan. I think once we slowly broke that down, that he kind of pieced every piece of the puzzle together, and he was the one that was the puppet master on the president, and basically risked himself and risked everyone to make sure his plan works. So that was really good, and that's how when I sort of said that I love the fact that it all tied up together nicely. That was just really good cinema or filmmaking. And the final thing that I did like was that he committed to that potassium terminology. That he said, when the attack's going to happen, I'm going to say the word potassium. And the other two times where the attacks didn't happen, he never used the word potassium. And then when he eventually did it the third time, I was like, oh, you probably should have listened to him from the very start.
Yeah, no, that's a very good pickup. I thought it was just and obviously that lecture that he was in when he got that news that the president had died. Like that was what they were discussing in class. It was just a nice
yeah,
that was cool. Good. All right, yeah. There's a bit of a bagging online for some of the songs that were used in this film because especially in that bar. And people are doing it based on the timeline of when this was actually happening and the songs were released after, or after. And I didn't really care because to me that made me feel like this had a bit of a budget. Like there were these two banger songs that like well-known songs that just made it feel like a real movie to me, and I liked that. I thought that was cool.
It is sloppy though. If the years don't work, I do find that I didn't pick up on it because I don't necessarily know what years songs are released, but I do find that kind of stuff when you're trying to create a historical context. That's a bit sloppy.
Yeah, I did like when Ashraf went to see Sadat when he's announced as that new president with all that information on Sammy. And his mates and the bribery and corruption. I just thought that was a cool. I think I mentioned that with the characters anyway, so I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And the last part that I liked was with Ashraf telling Danny about Egypt crossing the Suez Canal, and he sees him gets the money, and it cuts to him in this gambling situation, and it just like goes to show his vice. And there's this specific move where he's either playing poker and he goes all in. And it was just this analogy for this whole situation. He's fully all in on this sharing of information now. So I just thought that was a cool little visual cue for what was happening.
I had that in my scenes that I didn't like, Jesse.
Okay, good. Go for it. Fill me in.
Because it was way too literal and way too obvious an analogy of what he was doing. Like when they go to the poker's all fine, but when he actually sat there and went all in, I was like, no, yuck.
I can see why, but I don't know. Maybe it was just something I just needed at that stage. I was like, oh, cool.
Maybe he should have pushed the chips in without saying all in. It was when he said all in, I was like, yeah, come on. I'm better than that.
All right. What else didn't you like?
Look, I thought the opening minute basically that tried to set up the entire landscape was incredibly dense with information and facts and statistics, and I was completely overawed by all of it. And I just felt like I'm like, okay, I'm just so far behind the eight ball already because I feel like I've missed all of this stuff. And I get that you got to create context, but it was an intimidating opening. It was like, okay, make sure you're listening right now and take it all in. And then it was just bombarding with information. And I was just like, sorry, you lost me already. And I didn't like that. I didn't think it was a nice way to start a film. And then apart from the poker scene, the only other scene that I do have is, and it's not even a scene, sorry, it's just a general thing I didn't like, which I've already touched on, that so many people and all these details that I was really struggling to keep up with, their plans, their motivations. I didn't necessarily know who's good and who's bad and why they were good and why they were bad and what they actually wanted. It was the detail of the film that got me. And I think that's just got so much to do with the fact that I wasn't familiar with the story or the situation or anything to do with this war and the lead up to this war, that I got lost in the detail a lot of the time, and that made things difficult for me. And as I said, it's a film that's about preparing for war. So it's not an action film. It's not necessarily, as much as there are clues and things to solve along the way, it's not really like a mystery either. It's the political side of what you need to do to have a successful strategy with this, and that was a little bit dry.
No, yeah, all completely fair. The only really thing that really annoyed me was anything that tried to make Ashraf out other than being a family man, because I just didn't appreciate that, because you saw him, he was so good with his son. Um, he was so good in the
Mm.
situations with Diana, the get off his palace, like I mentioned. It just, to me, it didn't work with him as a character, especially if you don't want any extra things to try and have against him other than the situation that I guess he was trying to deal with. So, and he wasn't even tempted. So there was
Mm.
clearly no other woman, and I don't know, it just didn't feel right for me. All those scenes that tried to be something that they weren't, and maybe that's
Yeah,
more
I
about
think
Diana's character.
if anything, though, it might, like the way you talk about Ashraf, it might make you like him even more. That deep down, he is a good guy, and there was nothing that he did
Yeah,
wrong. But um, yeah,
it
they
just
didn't
sucked. It
seem
just still
like they were
sucked
that
that
required.
even though we know he didn't do anything wrong, that he ended up lonely at the end. Like,
That was rough.
yeah. All right. What are some themes or some ideas from this one?
Well, I think there's a big theme about the idea of trust and faith. Obviously, in others, the way that Danny and Ashraf had their relationship, and the way that the president had to trust, and the way that I can't even remember what the organization was called. Danny works for now, but the way they all had to trust that the information they were getting was correct, and the person that was delivering them was fair, but also the ability to have that faith in what you believe. And I guess that's where it comes down to what Ashraf did from start to finish. Was he so strongly believed in this idea of peace between these nations that he carved out this entire plan, even when things looked pretty dicey for him. Like, he basically almost got killed at one point with a gun to his head, and he was still, willing to trust and have that faith in what he believed was right, all the way through. So it's a nice recurring theme throughout the film that happens, just not for one character, but also for the way that characters have to interact with each other as well.
Yeah, I think the only other things they sort of build on what you've said. So you've got that idea of trust and the truth that needs to be put in with that as well. And you spoke
Mm.
about him wanting to do the right thing, and that I thought they did a good job through this idea that Nasser, the president who passed away, was this old philosophy, this old way of dealing with situations, and just throughout we could see this different sort of changing new ideas, even though they still stuck with this idea that war is still a really dirty thing. They attack
Mm.
on the holy day, and
Mm.
just it just highlights that there is still this tension still exists today, in the Middle East, and Israel with their backing from the USA, and over land, and all this sort of stuff. It's just it's an interesting thing that we can look 50 years ago and say, hey, we've still got this similar sorts of issues going on. This whole idea about the boy who cried wolf as well, I thought it was just worth
Yeah.
touching on. I know it was very it was very explicit in your face what they were trying to do, but this suggestion that he deliberately fed the Israelis these two false reports about this war, and apparently it cost $34 million. That's how much money they spent on mobilizing their army for this attack that wasn't even real. So,
Wow.
and this idea that they wouldn't believe him when he warned for a third time about the attack, but as you mentioned before, he used that code word. So I just thought this whole idea, this analogy of this fable almost was a cool little insider sort of thing too.
I think that was good as well. I think the difference between, let's say, the explicit nature of the all-in thing, that was a film thing, right? Whereas the Boy Who Cried Wolf thing was a character thing where Ashraf actually brought it in and referenced it, because he was almost like saying, you got to be familiar with this Boy Who Cried Wolf thing because it might come in handy for you one day. And he was exactly the Boy Who Cried Wolf, right? And the third time when the wolf actually comes, no one did anything, but fortunately they listened to him that time. So I think there's also an idea of risk and risking everything, which is exactly what he did, right? And at the end of the day, he loses his family and subsequently loses his life because of this. And it makes me wonder. I think he becomes quite a noble character throughout all this, but is it all worth it? Like, when you figure out what you've lost, and when you see him sitting on the seat at the end of the movie, yeah, was that risk that he took worth it all? I don't think that's clear either.
From what I've read, I think he was quite well off after all this had happened, and they lived in quite a nice apartment with his wife, lived a pretty luxurious life afterwards. So, yeah, I think the film's trying to tell his story in a little bit of a different way than what possibly. And I
Yeah,
guess you got
sure.
just got to question that all the time when you see an adaptation of a real life story. But I completely agree with exactly what you said. Like maybe that's what they're wanting us to think is, was it worth it for this
Yeah,
character?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what did you take away from this one then?
I actually I look back on it quite fondly. I appreciate being introduced to this story. I found it quite interesting, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it was told in a pretty dull and slow way, and I think the movie is interesting but not entertaining. This isn't a get your popcorn ready and let's sit down on the couch on a Saturday night type watch. It's a oh, I'm interested in this event, or I like discovering the details of how countries go to war type film. I think there's a big difference of how you want to consume this movie.
Yeah, I had it down as like it's a shitty James Bond film, but it's enjoyable because you know a lot of the things happen in real life, so you get the enjoyment of that you probably don't in James Bond, where you're taken away in that fantasy sort of idea.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's
that's a
that's
good
where I'm at.
summary.
IMDb, did you jump on to check anyone out?
Yeah, I did for Danny, who's played by Toby Kebbell. He's in a look. I haven't watched a lot of Black Mirror, but I have seen the episode that he is in for Black Mirror. And that was, I think, that's probably the main thing I recognize him from. But he's also from Kong Skull Island, and when I looked at a few stills from him there, as one of the, I think one of the fighter pilots, one of the army men there, I recognized him there as well. But he's just got that face, and I was like, man, I know this guy. But yeah, it was actually the perfect IMDb because you're like, okay,
Yeah,
I'll probably remember you next time, Toby Kebbell.
good. Yeah, I didn't jump on, so didn't even. Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen Black Mirror and I've seen Kong, but I didn't even recognize him from either of them. Good. All
Yeah,
right.
like he's not like he's major in the episode of Black Mirror, but he's not major in Kong. But he's just got that face where you're like, I
Yeah.
know you, I 100% know you.
You have any questions that you'd like to ask?
Uh, Look, we've kind of touched on it, but maybe we haven't asked it explicitly. I want to know: is Ashraf a good man, and was he always a good man?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if depending on the film story,
Yeah, the
I'm
film story.
undecided. Yeah, based on the film, I'm undecided. I don't know whether he was doing it for the right reasons. So yeah, I
Yeah,
left
you
that
did touch on
thinking
that. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think he had good qualities, but I also think he had some poor qualities, and yeah, some of the actions were based on yeah, anger and distrust and hatred, and I still don't know whether he was doing, if he was doing it for the money for the family, or what. Like he was obviously gambling a lot of it as well. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if there's a scale of good and bad, I think he probably does err to the good side. But yeah, you're right. It's definitely not clear. But when I was watching the film, I'm like, this guy's a douche. And then by the end of it, I'm like, oh, this guy's a bit of a hero. So that was what got me.
That my one of my it's very very similar. Like, was he more about securing peace, or was he just after power and money?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a very similar
Yeah, it's
question.
very similar. Yeah.
Look, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Yep. Good. Yeah, I'm happy to do that too. Then let's both be positive on him. That's a good way to wrap it up. And the other thing that this frustrated me, and I'm pretty sure we've answered this already by the way we've been talking, but online I read a few reviews, and a lot of the reviews were talking about how angry they were um, with Ashraf because, or not Ashraf, but because Sadat kept changing his mind about these attacks. So to me, I don't think people have read this film properly, in that the whole idea was that he convinced Sadat the whole time to do it on that third attack, and use the previous two times to test them. So that was how I read it. I'm pretty sure that's how you've read it as well.
Yeah, basically the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Because yeah, I read 3 or 4 reviews that were all like they didn't understand that. So I'm glad that you can support me in saying that I've seen it. Okay. Good. Okay. That's about it then. So I think we're ready to wrap it up and give it a overall rating for our show, where we go out of 5 stars and try to work out an overall average. So what have you got for us?
Yeah, look, as I said, it was dense in detail, which certainly detracted from the viewing experience. But I did enjoy the way the story all came together. It really worked quite nicely in the end. It left me feeling somewhat satisfied with what I'd watched and what I'd learnt, despite the fact that the overall engagement levels weren't necessarily there. But for me, it's still at 2.5 stars.
Nice, good. Well, yeah. I think I probably liked it a little bit more than you possibly, but yeah, I think I learnt a lot from this one. I liked hearing a story that I didn't know and the lengths that someone went to try and create peace, I guess. I was interested, I was engaged, thought it was a decent job. Like I mentioned at the start, I was quite like the tension build was quite good for me. And I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. So gives
No,
us a
nice.
average of a 3, which is a nice little solid number. Sits in nicely with Letterboxd.
Yeah, I agree.
So we are on social. We have Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and we pop a question of the week up. This one I've taken as a line of dialogue, and it's: this is how liars are rewarded. Even if you tell the truth, no one believes you. Is this the right way to treat liars? You give them 2 chances and then they're out, sort of thing. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
I don't know. I don't think you can have a hard and fast rule, can you?
Oh, well, I think if you've catch someone out for telling some mistruths multiple times, then it's almost time to say goodbye.
Yeah,
All right.
I don't
Well,
know. That's a hard one.
it is. Well, we're back again next week. So we have another 2018 film. It's a comedic drama film, and it's called The Land of Steady Habits. It's directed by Nicole Holfenser. It stars Ben Mendelsohn, Eddie Falco, Thomas Mann, and Connie Britton. So some good names in there that I recognize, which is nice.
Looking forward to it.
Good. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for having a nice chat, and I will see you next week.
Sounds good, mate. See you then.